Good evening, everyone. Can I have a motion to resume public session, please? Ms. Hinchy Unson and Ms. Kies, all in favor? The vote is unanimous. We're in public session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any agenda changes?
There is an update to personnel.
Thank you. So at this time for Board Vice President comments, I would just like to take a few minutes to thank the Gates Child Education Foundation, as well as district volunteers and participants, Board of Ed volunteers and participants, staff, students for the Wizards game. I heard it was a wonderful, wonderful time for all families and those in attendance. So we just like to thank them for their support regarding that. I also would like to throw in there Happy International Women's Day. Sorry, guys. But we also know that many struggles that women have had, so we want to take time to celebrate this day. And that's it for Board Vice President comments. Points of interest. Yes, Ms. Ms. Coffey.
So I know you just mentioned the Wizards game, but seeing all the high schoolers really support their community and the younger kids there and enjoying the activities with them and really getting to see all the families kind of just relax and have fun and staff members in a different environment. Some of them brought their families. It was a really positive environment and just a chance for people to get to spend time together. So that was great.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Ms. Johnson.
So last Wednesday, the girls sectional for bowling, and our girls came in second for Class B. So good job, girls.
Congratulations. Very nice. Thank you. Any other points of interest? All right. Moving to report of meetings. Mr. Moscato?
I attended the Monroe County School Boards Association Legislative Committee. We discussed going to Albany, but since nobody's there, we're not going. So we're going to try to do some local advocacy with our representatives in their office or Zoom. We haven't worked that out yet or anything else. We had a pretty good discussion about the issue of electric buses. The consensus seemed to be that it's not as simple as I think the governor wants it to make it out to be. And many of the people there just did not have any confidence in being able to do it with the timeline they were given. Not only the cost, but also the infrastructure needed. And a couple of the districts, they weren't sure about details about how long you could run the bus on a single charge. And is it affected by winter? Things like that. So there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for it, even though the intention is positive. But so this is one of the things that we will be discussing with our local representatives, to either adjusting the timeline or put a little more awareness into what the unintended consequences are for something like this. Among which is getting RG&E to correctly timely install charging stations. And where they put them and where we put our buses and little things like that. So, so that was one of probably the major things for there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moscato. Any other report of meetings? Okay. Thank you so much. We will move on to visitor comments. The Gates Child Central School District Board of Education invites public comment at this time. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. We ask that individuals state their name and address prior to comments and utilize the podium and microphone to address the board. Although the board will not respond directly to individual comments at this time, items brought to the attention of the board may be taken under consideration for future response or action. In order to comply with laws related to confidentiality, we ask that issues related to specific school district personnel or students be brought to the attention of the superintendent of schools privately. The board reserves the right to terminate a speaker's comments if his or her comments are in excess of 3 minutes, are repetitive, or are not appropriate for discussion in an open public forum. So I invite to the podium Mr. Charles Johnson.
How you guys doing? Well, it's good to see your faces. The only thing I just want to say is, the kids had the week off of school, and they still had to wear a mask 2 days after the whole week vacation, and I don't know what that was about. I just want to remind you guys not to play politics with the kids, because the whole mask mandate for the kids for the past 2 years was politics. And I am looking forward to information coming out on mainstream media about the side effects of the kids wearing the mask for the past 2 years and everything I've almost been saying for the past year. But that's it. Other than that, good to see you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next, we will move on to reports and start with the K-12 special education update.
All right. Good evening, Superintendent Daly, Vice President Richards, and members of the Board of Education. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the great things that are occurring in the area of special education throughout the district. This evening, I'm continuing my endeavor to get members of the Student Support Service staff in front of you so that they can talk about the wonderful things that they're doing each and every day throughout the district. To that end, this evening I brought with me Adam Mattice, who I'm going to invite up here in a minute to talk to you. As you may know, Adam Mattice is our district autism spectrum disorder specialist. He has 23 years in public education, 10 years in the classroom, 10 years as a Monroe 2 Orleans BOCES autism specialist, and this is his third year here with us at Gates Child Eye. As you know, my philosophy continually has been to work towards bringing students, programs, and services into our district to the greatest extent possible. This has been my goal for the over 5 years that I've been here, and I thank you all immensely for helping me in this endeavor through your support. Hiring an in-district autism spectrum disorder specialist was key in bringing back and maintaining students and services in our district, and it allowed us to expand our programming for students, especially those students that are on the autism spectrum. Prior to Adam's arrival, we were receiving autism services that were itinerant, and although the individuals providing the services were skilled, the nature of the services, just because of the nature of the services, were very disjointed. When Adam came, he brought a cohesiveness that was needed in order to improve the effectiveness of the supports that we provide to our students, our staff, and our families. When the Board of Education agreed to create the district ASD specialist position, my colleagues Julie Stark and Danielle Torrey, who's here this evening, told me, we need to get somebody like Adam Mattice. At that point, I really didn't know who Adam Mattice was, and so we were all pleasantly surprised when he applied for the position, and he interviewed for the position, and he hasn't disappointed since then. He's been an asset to our district, and his guidance and support is sought out on a daily basis throughout the district. One of the many things that I appreciate about Adam is that he just doesn't talk the talk, but he walks the walk. He's in the classroom working with kids and providing on-site, real-time training for staff each and every day. Additionally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Adam's work in our district is directly aligned to our strategic plan for equity. When we consider how we're going to promote diversity in the district of all types, we can't forget neurodiversity. Adam continues to assist the entire district in better understanding and appreciating our students' neurodiversity, which enriches the learning environment for all of us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam so that he has the opportunity to discuss his role in the district and how he champions neurodiversity each and every day.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Daly, Vice President Richards, members of the board, and thank you to Jason DeJong. I start by talking about this statement. I'm a non-autistic special education teacher who partners with the autistic community and professional educators to increase awareness, acceptance, and advocacy for autistic students. The reason that I start with this statement is that it clearly defines my intentions. Whenever I work with groups of individuals, I like to state that I view myself as a cross-cultural interpreter, one of those individuals who relies on his training, support, and background to interpret what the autistic community is telling us as non-autistic individuals. I believe it's unbelievably important to our work to understand the plight and mission of our autistic individuals. I work on behalf of both the autistic and the non-autistic community. By providing that cross-cultural interpretation, I believe that we can truly understand the needs of our children who have autism. I personally believe you can't teach kids with autism without understanding, without empathy, without compassion. The reason that I start with those three attributes are that they are important to every single piece of work that I do. Our children are often unable to communicate their wants and their needs. They can't easily use words the way that we can to communicate the things that they need. So they need people in the non-autistic community to really support and rally around what do they need, what do they want. Through this work, it helps us understand how to better support them. One other aspect of the work that I do is I start with this slide always. Try to understand, if you think I'm puzzling, imagine what the world is like for me. I try to recollect and consider this with all human interactions, regardless of who I'm speaking to. Most importantly, though, I think about these things when students are dysregulated, when they are in crisis, when they need us as non-autistic individuals to support them through that process of accessing coping skills and calming their bodies or minds. Which brings me to a story. In thinking about which story to tell you guys tonight about one of our students, I struggled. There are so many examples of really great work that we're doing here at Gates Chili, but I did want to highlight one individual, one young man in a first grade classroom who struggles to communicate and use words on a regular basis. He uses his behaviors and his bodies to communicate the things that he needs to communicate. Unfortunately for this young man, he has learned a system and set of routines that include self-stimulatory behavior or self-injury. So oftentimes this young man will hit himself in the head, both when excited and stressed. It's shocking, it's surprising to see, but also a part of who this young man is and how he presents. One day at the end of school, I was called into a crisis. I was told that a student was struggling and needed support in room X. I quickly, briskly moved to that room, and I sort of knew who this individual was going to be. It was the end of the day, it was pickup, and so there were lots of transitioning occurring for this young man. I walked up to the room, and before I entered the room, I heard him upset. I heard his vocalizations, I heard him screaming and crying, and also slapping himself in the head. So I knew that this young individual needed support. I looked at the teacher and said, "What do you need from me?" And the teacher simply said, "I need this young man to go see his mom." So I said, easy enough. I've got 23 years of experience. I can do this. I offered my hand to this young man, and I said, "Come on, buddy, we need to go see your mom." He accepted my hand, which I assumed was natural affirmation. I understand what you need. Let's do this. As I turned to walk, I couldn't have been more wrong. This young man did not move. He grabbed at my arm and pulled back at me. At that point, I knew that this individual was not easily understanding what I needed from him, but more importantly, was not going to see his mother. I needed to do something different. At this point, the individual banged his head on the doorway. At that point, the entire class turns to stare at this young man, including the teacher. And I knew at that moment he needed some privacy. He needed some understanding. He needed some compassion, but in a way that he understood that I was offering it. I closed the door and said, "Teacher, thank you very much. Students, have a great day," and closed the door. At that point, the student hit himself again in the face and then slammed his head one more time into the wall. My initial reaction was to put my hand between him and the wall. Interestingly, I changed that reaction because that would only temporarily stop the headbanging. I needed to understand what he needed, what he wanted. I dropped to my knees in an act of desperation and human compassion and offered an open hand cue. This young individual turned to me, and it was a change to what I was offering. He walked over to me, put his head on my shoulder, and embraced me and started to cry. At that moment, I knew that he had that connection. He understood that I was offering support, and he allowed me to support him. At that point, I knew it's time to go. I offered my hand and said, "Come on, buddy, let's go see your mom." He took my hand. He cried the whole way to see his mom, but he walked with me on his own. He did it with his own choice. I don't necessarily know that the outcome of that story would have been the same if I would have pressed, if I would have pushed, if I would have kind of encouraged him along with that hand. So it constantly reminds me to go back to that understanding, that compassion, that moment of, if this is hard and I'm viewing it and it's difficult for them, imagine, or for me, imagine what it must be like for him. And that drives all my work with any individuals. So that brings me to kind of a little bit about autism. I think autism is the presence of something like repetitive behaviors, engaging in the same routine again and again. Sometimes our kids have specific focused interests, so they struggle to attend to the things that we as teachers need them to attend to at those moments. And it is identified by language and communication differences. The most common question I receive in my consultation is when describing student behavior, and the question is this behavior or is it autism? My response indefinitely in every situation is it's both. I don't necessarily think we can understand autistic behavior or behavior in essence unless we understand it from the lens of autism, the perspective of the mind of someone who is autistic. So I continue to encourage people to think about what is autism and how does it relate to every single day for these young individuals. And I believe wholeheartedly that autism impacts the way in which our students process the world around them physically, emotionally, and socially. So we cannot forget that angle, that lens, that understanding of autism when treating and approaching students on the spectrum. I support any GC staff member who requests support. So this could be administration, staff, faculty, building level faculty, and other individuals. TEACH is a leading and successful autism program out of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I started my work with the University of North Carolina over 10 years ago. I'm one of 2 regionally certified TEACH-based practitioners in all of Western New York. There just aren't many of us here regionally. I have worked with directors of UNC, directors of training to gain the certification, and it has allowed me to support and consult in the field of TEACH at Disney with our program. It is a unique program that does support visual processing and independent skills for our students with autism. The program, when I first got to GC, there was 1 program, and we've expanded it to include 3 programs, 3 different classrooms. Another program that I'm really excited to be a part of is our communication and social skills program at the middle and high school. This program targets students who are at normal to above average intelligence and have some ability and struggle with social and language impairments. What this program does is individually specifically define what skills are needed, whether they be social, study, or communication skills, and we teach those skills to these students in real time. We teach, we practice, and then we apply what we learn. So it's been quite a nice connection from my work in the past and what I'm doing now. It also provides me a scope of services being provided from when children are young until they're much older. I also support all the 1211 classrooms and all the K-12 buildings. So as teachers need support and or the IEP defines, I support students in our integrated co-taught programs as well as our general education students. It's a snapshot view of the students I support, but I really look more comprehensively at the entire district. And how do we build capacity for autistic understanding for all? This is currently how I'm spending my time, and I thought it was important to share with the board. Although this has shifted and will continue to shift as time goes on, most of my time, as you can see, is spent in classrooms with teachers. I wholeheartedly believe in the presence as a means for our shifting and supporting people and being connected, observing, working directly with students, modeling and coaching in real time is the most applicable and supportive support a consultant can provide. That's through years of hearing that from my teaching teams. We like that you're here, we hate when you leave, which is great, and that's how I define and describe this consultation. Another portion of the work that I do, and a huge portion, is the staff training. I spend a significant amount of my time, both personally and professionally, developing, defining, and tweaking staff training to support current classroom needs and student needs at Gates Chilai. Two other smaller portions of my time is spent doing office work. Includes emails, follow-up with phone calls to families, writing up recommendations and sending them to teachers' emails. But I also can create materials to model for teaching teams. So if someone's struggling to know how to use a specific strategy, I can create materials to model that for them. So it's just a quick snapshot view, though, of how I currently allocate my time, and I thought it was important for the board to be in the know. Lastly, I want to talk about my consultant. I believe that as a consultant, the success of my students is directly related to my success at building relationships, rapport, and trust within individuals. Jason said to me, "What do you need when you first started this role?" And I responded with time. I think relationships take time. I have found through my work through the years, sometimes a teacher may take one consult before they're ready, willing, and interested in receiving recommendations, whereas many other folks may take more time than that due to exposure to other consultants that maybe have not provided what they needed, individual specific fear about acknowledging some of the skills and areas needed for growth. So oftentimes I think relationships are where I spend the majority of my time in building those relationships. I have been able to do that successfully over the last 3 years here at GC. When I came in, I knew very, very few individuals. I personally am at the point where I was able to complete all of the first round of consultation within the first 2 months of school. That was vastly different than the first 2 years I was here. It's also vastly different than how we as BOCES consultants could have provided services. It took much more time because there were more individuals. We didn't know all the players. Being an in-house person allows me to know all the people. I can get to them faster and more immediately. And due to the fact that I've put in some time to that relationship, I can get to consult a lot faster. Another way that I build relationship is through consistency. I say that I will be there, and I am. I think one of the biggest statements that teachers have made to me is just, I need more time with you in the classroom with the kids. And I listen and respond to those needs and those requests. I follow through. If I say I'm going to do something, I follow through and do it with immediacy and as soon as I possibly can. But more importantly, the recommendations and supports I'm providing over time are building internal capacity for people to apply these strategies and skills. So the consistency through recommending supports, teachers are now buying into those recommendations and strategies before they even call me out for the first time or first consultation. So through that relationship and through that consistency, I'm able to build staff capacity to provide these supports without necessarily needing to access a consultant. I'm also available to staff administrators at all times throughout the 10-month program, and I focus on GC students, learning, teaching teams exclusively. I don't have the distractions of other buildings, other programs, other agency needs. I can focus specifically on GC. One other super important aspect is my professional development that I'm able to provide folks within the district. Over the past 3 years, I've been able to coach, provide in-services, and turnkey several topics and training that are evidence and research-based in the field of autism. I drive to SUNY Brockport. Our 611 classrooms go to an adaptive phys ed program on a weekly basis or even sometimes biweekly basis. And when our staff was there, I noticed that the teacher aides were sitting around socializing, having some time just to them. And I thought, what a unique opportunity where I have a captive audience and all members of those teams available. So I drove to SUNY Brockport. When the kids are engaged in the program, I work with the aides, I secured a classroom, and I'm working with the aides to support their training and including our endeavor to teach them about autism. Through the COVID closure, I was able to use online webinars in evidence and research-based topics with all of our paraprofessional staffs. I had approximately up to 40 aides 4 separate times work through online webinars and then unpack with me through Zoom sessions what they had learned and how they might apply what they know. So I was able to access training through COVID and get people actively engaged in the conversation about what are we learning about autism. Last night I sat with 15 educators exploring neurodiversity and inclusive strategies, a new training protocol encouraged by my boss Jason to really think deeply about how does this term neurodiversity apply to our students and our student population. And the response from individuals has been really great. So I look forward to continuing that collegial circle. I have a few more points, and I know that I'm talking a lot. I appreciate all this time. Parent counseling and training is a service I provide through IEP delineation. And this service is for parents of any child diagnosed with autism to connect with school-based professionals with expertise in particular areas of development. So if a child is struggling with assistive technology or communication, I sit with the parent, the special education teacher, and the speech-language pathologist and develop a plan providing parents supports as to what we do in school. It's bridging that gap between home and school and what happens here. That's really important for a lot of our families of children who cannot speak or share their experiences when they go home. So I think it is important to have this opportunity to support families in our work and that it doesn't stop at 3 o'clock. Another important aspect of what I do is really supporting and co-facilitating social skills group. I provide 3 elementary social skills groups I co-facilitate with mental health providers. I also provide 3 groups at the middle school level. I facilitate these groups. We work through social skills checklists, define social skill interventions, and intervene with actual teaching. I attend staff trainings. This has been the most exciting thing for me as a district employee, professional development and building level meetings, at which point I'm able to understand and really be in tune with district-based initiatives. That's nicely because it allows me to dovetail that and connect it immediately to the work that I do. So I don't feel so disconnected from what the district's goals are. And it allows me to connect it directly to my work. The last portion of what I do and something I wanted to clearly talk about is I work with a regional expert in autism and clinical psychologist, Dr. Danielle Morris. We collaborate with targeted teams and specific students to support our individuals with autism. She's been a great support to me over the past 15 years and encourages me to be a better clinician and educator. And she is a nice support to our program in that we always have someone to back up with or support our needs and our district initiatives. And it's been wonderful having her as part of this team. I know that was a lot of information. I know it was me talking to you guys. I appreciate that time, but wanted to introduce a little bit about what I do. I love the work that I'm doing here, and I appreciate you guys offering me this opportunity. So thank you. Yep.
Any questions? Any questions that you might have for me or Adam about his support or Katie?
It's not a question, but a comment. As a special education teacher, I really appreciate the collaboration and the relationship building because it is so often difficult to feel like you're making successful progress for your students and their families, and having a team who knows the students, the families, and the teachers is very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will take we're going to back up for a second and pause for the capital improvement update. We do have another visitor comment. And I would just like to reiterate, I could talk, the bottom portion of our statement just to say, in order to comply with the laws related to confidentiality, We ask that issues related to specific school district personnel or students be brought to the attention of the superintendent of schools privately, and the board reserves the right to terminate a speaker's comments if his or her comments are in excess of 3 minutes, are repetitive, or are not appropriate for discussion in an open public forum. And we invite Mr. Derek Hardy to come to the podium.
Good evening. Before you start the 3-minute timer, I apologize. I apparently filled out the wrong sheet, so I
Nope.
want to apologize for that.
Thank
So,
you, you're fine.
Thank you for the opportunity. That's a tough one to follow, by the way. There's a lot of information. So, real quick, my presentation this evening surrounds some verbiage my family received through official correspondence from the Gates Challenge School District, specifically authored by the assistant principal at the Gates Challenge Middle School, dated February 24, 2022. In sum and substance, my son was accosted during school hours wherein another student laid hands to him. As parents have taught their child never to be the aggressor but to protect themselves from further provocation and injury, my son acted accordingly and protected himself. As a result of my son's defendable actions, a day of in-school suspension was levied after the assistant principal conducted his investigation, which included biased favoritism shown from other 12-year-old students in the classroom during the incident. Compounded with the teacher's inability to account for the events leading up to the incident, the investigation was poor at best. Subsequently, the official correspondence received outlined my son being placed on a special events watch list due to his receipt of an administrative referral. This type of fear-mongering by using the terminology watch list is not only in poor taste, but is consistent with society's fear of terrorism. Many terrorists are placed on a watch list, which by definition is a list of individuals, groups, or items that require close surveillance, typically for legal or political reasons. My son, nor the other child involved, should be subject to this self-proclaimed watch list. I would direct your attention to legal action taken in Pasco County, Florida, wherein the sheriff's office and school board discriminated against students when students' records were used against them as a direct result of predictive policing, which directly parallels this board's use of the phrase watch list. Not only is this term presumptive, this board's left-wing propaganda is not compelled to worry about the long-lasting implications of their approval and usage of the terminology. I respect that this board conduct a thorough investigation of using the term watch list as it refers to young, impressionable students and cease and desist its further usage. Furthermore, I ask that this board have this terminology removed from my son's school record, as he does not belong, nor should he be subject to be placed on such a misleading list. Using such terminology is nothing more than targeted child harassment by the school district. None of the actions displayed through the course of these events support the core values of the Spartan Way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Moving forward with capital improvement update.
Good evening. Look at everybody. What's it been, a year and a half, 2 years? I've gotten a little grayer, without them just saying. The board report you have in front of you, up on a slide, Eva's getting it. It was dated for February. I apologize, I could not make that meeting. So I would just as soon not even really read the front page. I'd just like to tell you about what's going on out there, because everything on that front page is outdated. All contract work is done. There's some extra work being performed out there. The mechanical punch list has been created by your engineering team and been handed out and is about 7/8 complete. Your electrical punch list has been created by your engineering team and is about 99% complete. The architectural punch list outside the auditorium proper has been handed out and is just about done also. And I think you guys have a walkthrough scheduled for the 20th, 16th, somewhere in there. And then that'll be the last punch list done inside the auditorium. There's a few back-ordered items that nobody will even know about. We'll sneak back in and take care of them at the proper time. The pictures you did see there had the concert shell. Oops, sorry, I wasn't keeping up. And the lightings in the front auditorium. I'm sure everybody's been in there. There's the concert shell, the lights in the front of the auditorium to walk through. They're in there practicing right now. I was in there beforehand. Some of your students and I believe community members. It sounds really nice in there. Does anybody have any questions for me? Because this probably will be the last time I attend a board meeting since 2016. Nothing? So I'll see you guys at the end of the month. There's a party or something, I hear. Something? I'm sure Mitch will want me to bring something. He hasn't just said what yet.
Thanks.
Thank you.
For the many years. It has been a pleasure. That's true. Thank you, sir.
Next, we have 2022 capital project planning.
Okay. Superintendent Daly, Vice President Richards, Board of Education, thank you for having me tonight to talk a little bit about the capital project. So on the agenda for us, we'll talk about the timeline, the phasing, stakeholder group timelines, and then who would be in the stakeholder groups and next steps. And this is relating to the project that was just recently approved by the public at nearly 78%. We had 293 yes votes and 83 no votes, as you're well aware. It was a very good turnout and a good vote percentage. We're very happy to see that it passed at such a high rate. So thank you to all voters in the community. So from a project timeline, I know you've seen this slide before. We're through the planning phase. So we're all done with that green planning phase, as you'll see on the slide here, and we're into the design phase now. So at this point, I'm going to outline what occurs in the design phase and what the next steps are relating to that. So first of all, I want to note that the project will be broken into two phases. The first phase will include the work that's over there on the left-hand side of the screen, the UPK playground and BCS, the administrative move to the high school technology rooms, the middle school technology rooms, and the the middle school music rooms. So when looking at the dates, we'll start schematic design, and that should be complete by June of 2022, and we'll go over what that entails in a minute. Then we'll go into design development, which should go through October of 2022. And from there, we're going to do SED submission. And so, as I've noted before, that process can take a while to get approval. We're hoping we'll get that approval by June of 2023. Then we'll go out to bid in August and do construction between November of 2023 and September of 2025. So as you can see, that's a long timeline for construction, but there's a number of moving parts in phase one. And you'll note that when I talk about phase two, the end dates align. So the end dates are all September of 2025, but the first phase we need to start earlier because there's a lot of moving parts with renovating at the high school in order to move the administrative team over there so that we can renovate this building for UPK. So there's more moving parts in the first phase than there are in the second. The second phase would include Florence Brasser, BCS at the high school, BCS at the middle school, BCS at Florence Brasser. Again, that's the building condition survey. That survey we do every 5 years. The multi-purpose field, lighting, and parking. And so if you look back at the phase one slide, you'll see that schematic design completes in June of 2022. This has really just moved out about a year to May of 2023 will be when we complete that portion of the work on the left-hand side. And again, if we just move those dates out, construction won't start until a year after phase one. It'll start in September of 2024, and it'll go all the way through September of 2025, which is when both phases would likely be complete. So when thinking about stakeholder groups, that's really our next step, is to put together stakeholder groups so that we can start talking about what these spaces are going to look like. As we noted in the past, in the planning phase, when we're doing the early portion of planning, we're not talking about what exactly is going into spaces. We're only talking about what the spaces are that we want to look at, and then what the potential cost of those spaces would be. And so now we're at the point where we're going to talk about what are those spaces really going to look like. And so the first part of that for phase one will include the schematic design meetings. And in those schematic design meetings, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what do we want to see in those spaces. What are the things that we want to accomplish with this work? And then the second part is design development. That's where the architects will come back with actual designs after we've had those schematic design meetings to talk about what will be in the rooms. They'll go back and they'll start doing that design work, and then they're going to bring back designs for the stakeholder groups to have conversations about whether or not it meets the needs of the various groups and the district as a whole. So now I'm going to go over the stakeholder groups and who they would entail. Currently, I am working with various members of our team, particularly Mr. Olin with the instructional side, and then some other groups as well to talk about who will be on these particular stakeholder groups. The first group is UPK concessions and playgrounds. You know, we'll have people from the instructional team, we'll have nurses, OTs, PTs, representatives from those groups. We'll have district leadership, we'll have facilities, maintenance, security. We'll include everyone. And so currently we're working on those lists, but these are the groups. And those groups will meet in those time frames beginning in March, April, May, and June. They'll meet in those time frames to start going over what will be in the UPK concessions and playground. Stakeholder B would be the administrative relocation to the high school. Really, it's people in the district office. There's also some need for involvement from the principals at the middle school and the high school to be talking about that walkway. It's the walkway that we're going to connect the sidewalk that comes kind of from Buffalo Road or Wendy's coming up to the middle school, and then there's a gap in the sidewalk where kids often walk in the road going to the high school. We're going to look to create a sidewalk through that area for safety reasons, but again, we're going to need to meet to talk about all the steps we're going to need to take to make that happen. Stakeholder Group C would include the technology classroom renovations, and so that would be people from the technology department. And then the middle school classroom renovations, again, people from those departments along with building leadership and district leadership. So next steps when thinking about board and the work that we have to do as a board will include waiting. So now we're just going to be meeting for many months to be talking about what is going to go into these spaces, what it's going to look like. Once we get some more detail on it, the first step will be to bring it to the Finance, Facility, and Audit Committee to give them a look at what the architects have come up with initially and get some input there, share that with the board. Major designs will be shared by SEI, campus construction, and district administration sometime in the early to mid-fall, so probably August timeframe. Okay, any questions on the $45.5 million capital project? What's that? Yes, waiting, lots of waiting now to see what comes out of those stakeholder groups. All right, so I just want to give an update that's kind of an aside to this entire conversation. On Sunday, a portion of our roof at the high school was torn off as part of the windstorm. And so I just want to briefly talk about what that means for us as we move forward with addressing that issue. So this is a picture of the roof. This is above the library. As you can see on the left and the right, those are the same area but from different angles. A good portion of that roof was torn off. The roof is very old, to what I understand being over 30 years old, and it's constructed in a way that's no longer permissible by the New York State Education Department, and it was certainly something that we had planned on addressing. It was, this roof and some other roofs throughout the high school were alternates to our capital project, our $68 million capital project that we're currently completing, but they were alternates that we could not take because of cost and scope related to the project. And so just a little picture of where we're at, and I have a little laser light. I don't know if it's going to work. I can point up here, since you're looking that way, is on the left-hand side, the area we're talking about, it's hard to see, is roof 17. It's on the left-hand side. That area and the gray on the right, as you can see, it's a significant portion of the high school. Those were all alternates to the capital project, and they're all portions, yep. And the area on the right those are all portions of the old roof. And so aside from the Performing Arts Center, which is kind of the lower part, that's been completed. But the other part in the top right, that area is also in significant disrepair. And so what we need to do at this point is we need to consider an emergency project to remedy the roof issues specifically at the library, but also we're going to be asking the New York State Education Department to consider wrapping in some of those other areas on the right-hand side, because we currently have a lot of roof leaks in that area. It's in similar condition, and the concern is if we don't address it in the near term, that it will soon become a problem as the area in the library has become. So we have already notified the New York State Education Department that we have this issue. We would like to address that section and potentially some others as part of an emergency project. It does require New York State Education Department submission. It would also require board action. The board would need to approve a resolution. This does not require a public vote, but a board resolution when doing an emergency project, likely on March 22nd, so we're currently working through that. Tomorrow we're meeting with our school attorney, architects, and construction manager to work out more details. It would be aidable to the extent possible, and the sources of funding would likely be unappropriated fund balance. So we're working through all those details right now. It's something that just happened, so it's not something that I have all the details on yet, but wanted to share that this would be the third emergency project I've been involved in, so I do have some experience in doing these, and it's not as painful of a process as doing a full capital project. It's far less restrictive because it's an emergency condition. Any questions on that? Yes? They're in much better condition, yeah. Those are definitely the worst roofs in the district, by far, yep. When I've had the opportunity to walk on them, it's not a comfortable feeling to be up there right now with how wavy and squishy, and there's things growing out of them and cracks, and they're in pretty rough condition. Yeah. Any questions? Other questions? Okay, thank you. I think I will. All right, so just want to talk a little bit about the 2022-23 school year budget. On our budget calendar that's approved by the Board of Education tonight, I am tasked with talking about the tax cap calculation and the bus purchase proposition. So the tax levy limit. So the tax levy limit, there's a lot of requirements and conditions tied to how we get to our tax levy limit calculation. One of them is CPI-U. The tax levy limit is capped at the lesser of CPI or 2%. Last year CPI was 1.23%, which was under 2%, which means we were capped as a starting number at less than 2%. This year CPI, or I should say last year CPI, was 4.7%, significantly higher. Inflation is clearly on the rise. And so we are capped as a starting point at that 2%. So even though our costs are going up, we can't have a starting point of higher than 2% for our tax levy limit calculation. Another thing I wanted to share is that our tax-based growth factor, which is a factor that looks at how much your tax base has grown, so how much property values have gone up. Last year it was 1.0056. This year it's a little higher, it's 0.27. So essentially we can add that to our levy limit calculation. In addition to that, our capital exclusion was up $6,000. That is significantly less than last year. We are now at a level debt service principal and interest to aid ratio, where before we had increases relating to taxation for the $68 million project. Now we're at level debt in that area. Additionally, our payments in lieu of taxes are going up about $30,000, not a significant increase. Next year, we will see quite a precipitous drop if the pilots stay as they are currently. Right now, we're only looking at a $30,000 increase. So the tax levy limit on the estimated increase is 2.2%. This would be 2 years in a row where we're in the low twos for tax levy limit calculation. And that's that piece. Does anybody have any questions on the tax levy limit calculation? Okay, next I'll talk about the purchase of buses. So I first want to share a bit of really, really good news, great news. We are the second district in New York State, the first in Western New York, to be awarded the NYSERDA grant for purchasing 2 electric buses. I know Mr. Moscato was talking a little bit about this earlier and all the challenges related to electric buses. One of those challenges is the buses are up around $350,000 to $450,000. Very expensive buses. Luckily, we were able to be awarded 2 grants through NYSERDA for $200,000 apiece, making the net cost of a bus, an electric bus, lower than what we would pay for a traditional conventional bus. So really, really good news. It's been a long process, over a year. We've been working through this process. I want to thank the Director of Transportation, Matt Hembolt, for all the work that he's done around this, working with the state. The only reason why we weren't probably the first one awarded is because the other district is right next to Albany, and I believe that for maybe the PR being so close to Albany, it was probably easier for NYSERDA to award them first. But I do know that NYSERDA will want some involvement when those buses arrive to help us roll those out. It is anticipated that we will receive delivery in the May to July timeframe. One thing I also wanted to share, because Mr. Moscato talked about it briefly earlier, is that the charging of the buses themselves is also one of the things that we're working on. We were informed that through NYSEG, we're going to be able to get a grant through them as well, and 90% of the electric installation will be paid for through that grant. And so we'll only have to pay a small portion to get the electric to the side of our bus garage. So that is a cost, and that is a concern for the industry, because we have to do significant infrastructure upgrades just to be able to charge these buses. They do have about one of the comments was on range. They do have about an 80-mile range. So clearly that wouldn't work for some more rural districts. But here in Gage-Chili, we can make that work, especially in our Neil Armstrong and Walt Disney areas. These 2 buses will be operating in the Neil Armstrong district, or Neil Armstrong area, and we're very excited to have them. So any questions on this piece? Yes.
This raised by a family member who's a volunteer firefighter. Will there be any training with the fire department on how to respond to bus emergencies for electric buses? Could they address them differently?
That's a great idea. We haven't discussed that yet. It won't be driving them into Ontario Lake. We will have to talk about how that will be handled. I do not have a lot of knowledge about how to put out an electrical battery fire. So
yeah, I know they approach cars different, but the other thing, and I mentioned this in our finance and facility meeting, that I just wanted to say in public that thank you to you and your team and Chris for how hard you guys have worked on this grant. I know Mitch has been like a dog with a bone, not letting go of this, and really pushing hard to get this grant approved. So I, as a taxpayer, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We wanted to be out in front, and we're there. So we're happy to be in this position. Any other questions on the electric buses? Okay, I'm going to move on to next year's bus purchases and what the proposal is. So our bus replacement philosophy is to maintain a 6-year bus replacement schedule, ensuring the highest of safety standards as well as preserving long-term cost savings. So one important thing to note is that we receive approximately 75 cents, a little less, just a little under 75 cents on the dollar from New York State for every dollar that we spend on buses and on transportation costs. One thing that I want to also note is that there is a sweet spot for purchasing buses. We did some analysis to determine when it makes sense to trade in buses. And so there's a point at which the cost of keeping a bus exceeds the value of trading it in. And so when we couple that with maintaining high safety standards for students and staff, the best time to trade in a bus is 6 years. So again, we're going to be talking about electric versus diesel. Based on the grant, we're able to get up to 5 electric buses. And so last year when we talked about buying electric buses, we were talking about doing 4. Because the process is so cumbersome, we decided to trim it down to 2. And that was a good move because it allowed us to get through the process the way that we did. If we hadn't done it, it probably would have taken us much longer. And so this year, what we're going to be talking about is potentially moving into next year, looking at buying 3 additional electric buses, getting us up to the full 5 that we can get with the grant funding. Anything beyond that would likely be cost prohibitive at this point. So the benefits of electric, I know we've discussed this. We have the environmental considerations, the cost savings. The bumper-to-bumper warranty is phenomenal. We'll have a warranty for the lifespan of how long we keep it. And then the cutting edge, taking the lead on this is a priority of ours. And again, when we get those electric charging stations in, as you know, we now have a car electric charging station on the east side of the high school, and we're talking about building in more to the next project whenever we touch a building. Now we're going to have electric buses and the charging stations over there. We're just trying to really stay at the front of electric technology. So plan 1 is the electric plan. Buses to be replaced, 3 35-passenger buses, 1 35 wheelchair bus, 1 66 wheelchair bus, and 10 66-passenger buses for a trade-in value of $325,000. So the buses that we'd look to purchase would be 7 66-passenger buses, 3 35-passenger buses, 1 wheelchair 35-passenger bus, and 1 66 conventional wheelchair bus, and then the 3 electric buses. If we were to be awarded the grant for those 3 additional buses, we would get NYSERDA monies in the amount of $600,000, which would reduce the total cost of those buses significantly. The total that we'd be looking at would be about $1.8 million for a referendum for the public that we would need the board to approve in advance of the vote. So running through if we weren't able to purchase those electric buses for some reason, if the requirements change or something else happens over the course of the next year, we would have a Plan 2 in place. And the Plan 2 would replace the same buses. The only real difference is we would be increasing from the 7 66-passenger buses to 10. Because we'd be, not buying those 3 electric buses. All the rest of this is the same. Getting us down to about $1.7 million for bus replacement. And so what we'd be looking to do in this scenario is to put out a referendum that would be the higher value, which is the electric bus value. But I do want to share that the estimated savings in operation would be $267,000, just based on not using fuel. And that's based on fuel costs as they are a few months ago. Because fuel has gone on the rise, if fuel prices were higher, it could be a much higher number than this, with national fuel prices at around $4 a gallon. So again, there's an increased cost to go electric, but significant savings. So the net is to our benefit. Any questions about buses and the bus purchase referendum? Okay, so the next update that I'll bring to the board will include the budget, revenue, tax rate projections. That will be March 22nd. Also want to note that the first budget ambassadors meeting is on March 14th, which is this coming Monday. We're really excited to start that process with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to make it sweat for a little bit. So now we'll move on to finance facilities update.
Okay, Finance Facility Audit Committee update. So we had the meeting on February 28th. We talked about an RFP for property and casualty insurance, noting that unlike some other services that we put out requests for proposals in order to get better pricing for property and casualty insurance, which we haven't done an RFP for in quite a while. We're getting a great service, and so instead of going out for RFP, we're talking with NYSER about potentially reducing fees in order to retain the business. We talked about the budgeting process, what we reviewed today. We talked about the American Recovery Plan submission. It was finally approved by the state, which is really good news, and it has been posted to the district website. We'll be working on compliance requirements over the next couple of months because there are a significant number of compliance requirements. We talked about the NYSERDA grant for buses. We talked about an RFP for banking services, noting that we're working with 3+1, who helps us with our investments, to put out an RFP for banking services. An RFP has gone out to 37 banking institutions. We're going to try and get better rates for our money that we have in the banks. We talked about the intermunicipal agreement for COVID expenses with Monroe County. Right now we're waiting to hear back from Monroe County on reimbursement for costs. We talked about the new volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers tax exemption. The district was approached by the Gates Fire District, and after some discussion, because there's still a lot of investigation to do on this piece of legislation, we're going to be talking about it over the next number of months, and so it would likely be something that can be considered not for this tax season, but for next tax season if the board is interested in entertaining it after they have more information. We did not have any audit updates. We did have facility updates. We talked about the purchase of software to manage our key program, our hard keys. And so that is software that we're currently rolling out. We talked about a design room, plan room over at the Transportation and Facilities Building. We're getting all of our district plans and capital project files all in one place so that they're easily accessible and organized. We talked about the numerous Averti trailers that are scattered throughout the district that store all manner of district furniture and equipment. We talked a little bit about exploring storage facility options, maybe a centralized location that would save us money and be more efficient in terms of how we manage furniture. We talked about Master Library, which does a number of things for facilities, IT, and facilities use. It's a piece of software. We talked about managing furniture through that piece of software and furniture replacement in classrooms. We also talked about putting our preventative maintenance schedules into that software. And then we talked about the next steps with the $45.5 million project. And then we talked about capital outlay projects and the potential for doing some work throughout the district using capital outlay monies. And that's the entirety of the meeting. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
wanna stay a little longer?
I'm good. I'm good. Have a good evening.
Next, we move on to the Education Foundation update.
The Education Foundation met last week prior to the Wizards game to make sure they had everything in place for it. Now that the game has ended and successfully took place, their next meeting will, I'm sure, involve discussing how it went and looking at future fundraising ideas.
Thank you very much. Now we will move to approval of consensus agenda. Motion, please. Long, Moscato. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Next, we'll move on to approval of consensus items. Items B through G. Motion, please. Bailey, I was about to call you Bailey. And Littlewood. I know. All in favor? Vote is unanimous. Now we will. Nope, I didn't think so. That's why I looked at her. She normally tells me every time. Now we'll go to action item A, resolution for probationary administrative appointment. Motion to approve the resolution for probationary administrative appointment for Danielle Zanowski. I'll get it right. In the tenure area of building principal. Motion, please. Ms. Hinchy Unson, Mr. Moscato, all in favor? The vote is unanimous. Congratulations. You want to do it now? Yeah. Okay. Let's go. All right. Nobody's moving. Nobody's moving.
Why wasn't I trigger ready with that? Okay. Hold on. This is right in my way. Can you guys squeeze in just a little bit? The podium's right in my way. Okay, ready? No, it's beautiful. Next, we'll move on to approval of board vote on superintendent's hearing appeal. It's recommended resolved that the Board of Education, having heard an appeal from student A, discipline determination made by the superintendent of schools, designated as appeal number 1, and the following due deliberation, hereby affirm the determination of the superintendent of schools. Motion, please. Oh, sorry, Ms. Coffey. She threw me off. Mr. Bailey, all in favor? Vote is unanimous. Approval of 2022-2023 holiday calendar. Motion, please. Ms. Keyes and Mr. Moscato, all in favor? And it's unanimous. Nobody want to record the calendar? Now we're down to superintendent's comments.
Okay, well, Friday night's game against the Harlem Wizards was a great success. We saw the tremendous basketball skills exhibited by our chief of police. And also, I'm still sore. But with more than 700 tickets sold, we raised $3,500 for the Beach Charlie Education Foundation. Thank you to everyone who came out to play or watch. Yes, there's some quality photos. That's a new move, by the way. And there were certainly some interesting athleticism on display. On behalf of the foundation, I'd like to thank our event sponsors, Allied Financial Partners, Charbroil Restaurant, and LOGS Legal Group. We really appreciated their help, and it was great to see Saturday, March 31st, from 6 to 8 p.m. Save the date and watch your email on our website for more details about that event in the coming weeks. And a reminder that on Friday this week, there's no school for students because we have a superintendent's conference day. Just like we did this fall, our entire staff will continue our equity journey through storytelling, self-discovery, and self-care. The program is aptly named Gates Tri-Light, a collection of stories. We're excited to be able to have everyone in the Performing Arts Center for a keynote presentation in the morning. Then the afternoon will be focused on staff wellness. Staff were able to sign up for one of 4 wellness activities that included professional time in the classroom and office, celebrating and appreciating our school community through gratitude acts, taking care of their bodies with physical activity, or investing in their learning during the screening of a locally produced documentary. So we're excited to offer that this Friday, and again, students will be very disappointed to have a 3-day weekend, but we hope they get over it. And then finally, 3 minutes ago, the board approved the appointment of our next principal of Walt Disney Elementary School, Danielle. Mr. Zanowski will take over from Mrs. Elaine D'Amelio, who is retiring in June. He is currently serving as the Director of Instruction in Rich Henrietta Central School District. Earlier this year, he also served as an interim principal at Erie Elementary in that district. Welcome to our newest Disney dragon. And today I traveled back from the NISCUS conference in Albany. I presented alongside Jose Paul's line with Superintendent and paper and how that's impacting our pursuit of equity, and looking at how that has allowed us at the secondary level to allow all our students to have tutoring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a lot of fun presenting, and some great sessions down there. And Bob Lowry, who is the political consultant for the NISCUS, had some very promising things to share about developments in APPR, as well as how positive right now it is for education down in Albany. So we're excited to hear that, and it's a great experience to get down and see other superintendents from around the state and learn alongside them. But again, we're excited to add a band to our team, and it's hard to replace a legend, but it's as sure as it can, and that'll be fun. And again, thank you to all of you for your support through the process. As we'll be announcing tomorrow about the Paul Road Principal finalists. In that process, we hope our community will get involved as we look to add another great leader to our Gates Trial team. That's our report.
Thank you so much. If there's no need for executive session, can I have a motion? There is. Oh, I thought you said that. Oh. Motion to adjourn, please. Mr. Long, Mr. Littlewood, all in favor? It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you.